Hello and welcome to a new Leela game. This time she plays against Brainfish, another very dangerous animal. Brainfish is basically a stockfish using a huge opening book. This book is so big that it's not even called an opening book anymore, it's a playbook because many of the variations reach into the endgame. So Brainfish is basically stockfish on steroids and is very strong. The game is a replay of a historical World Championship game played in 1934 between Efim Bogoljubov and Alekhine. Alekhine being the fourth world champion after Stanislavski and Capablanca. He lost his title once to Max Oewe, but regained it 2 years later in a rematch and never lost it again. He is the only champ to have died while holding the title. The game started with d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, c4, d takes on c4, and now with queen a4 check we enter the Mannheim variation of the queen's gambit accepted. c6, queen takes on c4, bishop f5, knight c3, normal development from both sides, e6, g3, knight d7, bishop g2, and in this position in the original game Alekhine went for a cheapo with bishop c2. And here white has to be very careful, because if he continues with something casual like castles, then black has a killer move, which ends the game immediately. Can you spot that move? Pause the video if you'd like to find it yourself. Are you ready? Black's move here is knight b6, and the queen doesn't have squares. Bogoljubov of course saw the threat, and after bishop c2 he played e3, and now the queen can retreat to e2 if needed. Alekhine continued here with bishop e7, and now they castled, and now after a3 and a5 the queen came back to e2 to attack the bishop, which by going back to g6 now he lost two tempi, one coming to c2 and one coming back home. And thanks to that, white now has e4, gaining the control of the center, and black doesn't have c5 here, because after d5, pawn takes and e5, this knight has to leave his beloved f6 square. For example, goes to g4. And now after knight d5, white has a very nice position. He has control of the central squares and black lacks squares, and so on. So after e4, instead of c5, Alekhine played first queen b6, and after h3 he went for a queen exchange, but Bogo declined. And now c5, and this time c5 works, because in the same line with d5, pawn takes and e5, this knight doesn't need to move because black has d4, forking queen and knight. So after c5, instead of d5, Bogo went for e5 instead. And after knight d5, knight takes and pawn takes, we have reached finally the end of the book. And this is where Leela and Brainfish takes over. Both Leela and Brainfish followed the masters from the past for a couple of more moves. Here white needs to finish his development, and he played bishop d2. This bishop is going to c3, where it's not very active, but at least it defends good pawns. And here now we have bishop e4, bishop c3. And Brainfish is now the first to deviate from Alekhine. He played here rook d8. In the original game, Alekhine played c4, and then eventually he got in b5, and since the center is closed, he tried to attack on the queen side and Bogo on the king side. And Alekhine managed to establish b4 and c4 here, two very strong pawns, and he even harassed this bishop. But in the meantime, Bogoljubov managed to advance the pawns on the king side, and his attack was actually more dangerous and faster. And in the end, he managed to win the game. In this game, after bishop c3 instead of c4, Brainfish played for rook d8, and he closed down the center with c4, but only after Leela's rook d1. And now here after c4, Leela played a very strong move, which slows down black's attack and black's hopes so much that he has to look for counter chances somewhere else before he gets steamrolled on the king side by the white pawns. Leela played here a4, and black's hopes with b5 are very much reduced, because if b5 ever happens here, then after pawn takes and queen takes, black still has a pawn majority on the queen side, but these pawns are now split and they are also weak. The a5 pawn is attacked and it's very hard to advance them. If this pawn ever reaches to a3, then this pawn can take it out, and the c4 is not that dangerous at this point. And another plan maybe for black could be bishop b4 and exchange this bishop and then try to push this pawn forward, but with these pawns split, it's very hard to attack now on the queen side. So b5 not being very good. Here after a4, Brainfish played queen c6 to put some pressure on a4, and he has ideas like knight b6 and attacking a4, but Leela stops that immediately with queen d2, counter-attacking on a5 and basically forcing here b6, and now this knight can't go to b6 anymore. The game continued with rook e1, rook a7, h4, queen g6, queen d1. Leela wants to look over these light squares because she's planning knight h2 and maybe pushing these pawns. Rook c7, knight h2, and now because black doesn't want to exchange this very active bishop on e4, he played f5. And this is a good move because now white can take, because after f takes on e4, the f file opens up for black and he has very good chances. Also, taking en passant gives some squares for black and he has very good chances here. But instead of taking and taking en passant, here after f5, Leela played h5 first, and after queen e6, bishop f1, avoiding the exchange, and now she's threatening f3, basically forcing this bishop to go to d3, and after taking twice, she would win a pawn. Not wanting to lose a pawn after bishop d3 and also seeking counterplay, Brainfish now here went for activity and sacked his knight on e5. But this is a very good sack, because after d takes on e5, black would have d4 here, and these two pawns are very dangerous. If bishop takes, then after rook d7, black gets back his piece and he also gets a lot of counterplay. So instead of taking this knight, Leela continued with her plan and played f3. But now here the knight took on f3, check, knight takes, and in this position, because Leela is threatening to go with the knight to e5, Brainfish played bishop d6, stopping that. If now knight e5, then again black has bishop takes, pawn takes, and d4, and these pawns are very, very dangerous. But after bishop d6, Leela played knight g5, attacking the queen. And after queen h6, she even played bishop d2. And now after queen f6, she took on e4, and after d takes on e4, she has two pawns undefended, and she decided to defend the g3 pawn with king g2. The pawn on g3 is more important because it guards the king, and this pawn on d4 is already anyway attacked twice here by black, and it's very hard to defend. If bishop e3 or bishop c3 instead of king g2, then black can take on g3, and these pawns are basically coming down the board decisively. So Leela played king g2 to defend the pawn on g3. But Brainfish considered that the white king is not naked enough for his liking, and that he needs to sack his bishop also for that pawn, so he took on g3. And after king takes, he also took the pawn on d4. And here white is two bishops up, but his king is very, very naked, and black has all his major pieces, and these two pawns are also very, very dangerous, so white needs to be careful. Here Leela played queen e2, and she still evaluated this position much better for white at plus 2.3. But the position is very dangerous. Of course, for engines, tactics are not that difficult. And here, after e3, both bishop takes and queen takes are good for white in view of this f4 fork that is coming. But actually taking with the queen is better, because after bishop takes and f4, taking with the bishop is not good. If bishop takes, then queen takes, and if the king comes down, then rook d2 traps the queen. And if the king goes to h3, then after queen check, king g2 and rook g4, the queen has to give himself up, otherwise after king f3, queen g3 mates. Taking with the bishop is not good, so white would have to play something like king g2, and then he just loses a bishop. But this is still better for white. After queen takes e3, white's chances are still better. But even better after e3 is to take with the queen, because now after f4 check, you take with the queen, rook takes, bishop takes, and it is true that white invested some material, but his king is much safer now. He still has 2 rooks for that queen and 2 bishops for the rook, and those dangerous pawns are gone. So after queen takes on e3, Brainfish considered that f4 is not dangerous enough for white, and he played here rook e4, and Leela played queen f2, and now came queen h4 check, king g2, rook g4 check, king f3. Now queen takes on h5. Leela replied with bishop f4, trying to shield the king by controlling some squares. Rook d7, queen e3, trying to exchange the queens with queen e8 check. But here Brainfish went for rook takes on f4, another exchange sack. This is a double check, so the king has to take. And now after queen g4 check and king e5, Brainfish finally manages to win Leela's queen, but Leela is still up material. The 2 rooks are worth more than a queen, and she also has a bishop. But black has a lot of pawns, so this is still not over. The game continued with king f8, rook e1, and now Brainfish went for a pawn exchange. He played c3, and now after rook takes, he took the pawn on a4. And now came some moves in which Leela tries to hide with her king, and white is also trying to hunt down some pawns. Queen check. And here after king f7, in this position, they both agreed that white is winning. They both evaluated the position at +5 for white. And after some more moves, Leela is winning down another pawn, and they are all falling one by one. Now, some of you mentioned that you like the idea of skipping moves that are not so interesting anymore. But others said that they would prefer to see all the moves played out, even without commentary. So I created a poll, and I would like to ask you to vote for the variation you would prefer. If you're talking only about a couple of moves, then I will probably play them out and try to tell you something in the meantime, hopefully not something boring. But for longer sequences like this one, where this is only now technique, I would like to know your opinion. So there is a vote in the upper right, and please make a choice. Leela eventually wins also the b6 pawn and promotes her a pawn. And after that, she shields her king, and eventually the queen trade is unavoidable, and after that is really simple. Leela, of course, didn't finish this quickly. This is a mate in 4, but she finished it in 12. She likes to play very much. In this position, an easy mate would be king a5, and after rook b2, rook b4 check, and let's say after king a3, rook b4, king a2, and rook a4 mate. But she didn't play that. Here after king b3, she actually played rook c2. 2 rooks are one too many, so she wants to give one up. And now after rook d4, nicely boxing in this king, king b3, king c5, king a2, and now rook b4, restraining the king even more. Nice technique. King a1, and now bishop e4. She wants to get rid of the bishop to avoid any kind of a stalemate. King a2, now bishop check, king a1, and now bishop a2. And now after king takes, everything is just so much simpler. You just need to come closer with the king, and it's done. So she played rook b6. Well, she wants to make sure that the rook is safe. It's better to be safe than sorry. King a1, king c4, king a2, and now finally she approaches the black king, and after king a1, king c2, and king a2, she finally delivers a nice mate with only one rook. Nicely done. Another great game by Leela. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other videos. Please also don't forget about the poll and vote. And thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye bye.